parles français? Oh, toutes. Combien parlent anglais? Toutes. Presque tout pour le français et tout pour l'anglais, oui. C'est une bonne opportunité pour moi de pratiquer mon français, mais I speak much better in English, so I will conduct this seminar mostly in English because you'll understand me a lot better. It will be much less painful for you, I promise you. But I will try to speak some French too because I feel it's a privilege to try to do so. But note that my grammar is horrible. And
we don't care.
Your grammar is probably going to make my grammar look good.
Really? But it's what's that?
You're going to be embarrassed.
I don't know.
Oh, we were together in Vancouver last year, and she certainly did, just with her awesomeness, really. So.
I did what?
You embarrassed me with your awesomeness.
Oh, you're more than kind.
Okay, well, Terri, we have two panels this weekend. This first one is about voice acting in general, your time in Sailor Moon and so forth. And tomorrow, everyone, please don't forget that Terry's got another one about the creative process, about writing, acting, and directing as well. So that's the focus of that one. But this one is just really all about your time and the Sailor Moon stuff and voice acting in general.
Okay, great.
So, I mean, I've got a bunch of questions here, but really, we can do free form, right? Is that all right?
Absolument.
Throw in their questions. But, yeah. But I'm very happy to be sitting here with you right now because I live in Calgary, and we have a lot of budding voice actors, people trying to do stuff. It's all non-actor, of course, but a lot of people trying to get their start going here. But maybe we can start off with a little bit of your own history. Moving from, you were born in Toronto, and you did some education in Alberta at the UC, right? Or is it U of A?
You got half of that right. Je suis née en Montréal.
Ah!
Oui. Je suis née en Montréal. But I didn't live here very long. My father was going to Sir George Williams at the time, and when I was 6 months old, we moved back to Alberta, where my parents' families were from and my parents were from. So I grew up in Calgary, yes. I went to the University of Calgary for my undergraduate degree, which was mostly poli-sci and English and just kind of getting to know who I was, and I had a minor in drama. But I used to be very involved in theatrical training of sorts. I was with a group in Calgary called the Young Canadians of the Calgary Stampede. And that was a wonderful opportunity. I had 8 years of scholarships for singing and dancing and that kind of thing. And it culminated in this big show outdoors in front of thousands of people at the Calgary Stampede for 10 nights in a row. So it was a great training ground. It still exists today, as you know. So there are a lot of young people who have come up through those ranks. And then I used to do a lot of community theater. Are you okay?
All right.
Okay?
Ça va?
Ça va? Ça va? I do that too. And Serena does that too. So then I studied some drama at U of C and did community theater, and then I did a play at the Citadel Theater in Edmonton about Marilyn Monroe, and I played the young Marilyn, and it was such a great experience. I thought I'd like to try acting professionally. So I moved to Toronto, and I started working in theater and a little bit of TV. I started in commercials, and then some television shows, and at that time, the voice industry was just sort of taking off in Toronto. So previous to that, prior to that, most of the voice work had been done in Los Angeles. And then Toronto and Vancouver started to receive some work opportunities for voice actors. And this is a longer answer than you were looking for.
It's fine.
Should I continue with the genesis of that, or should we
if you
cut
guys
it
are
there?
interested in hearing.
Sure. Keep going.
Okay, so part of the gig of an actor, excuse me, as someone told me a long time ago, is to look for work. Your job is looking for work. So most actors, when they're starting out, work at whatever is available to them, as I said, commercials, kind of little church basement productions, so they hope some agent might be there or somebody who's casting the next show, that kind of thing. You do whatever you could. So voice acting wasn't as common, and there was sort of room to put a foot in the door. So I started working with radio drama. CBC radio drama was my first kind of voice work, and I loved that. It's such a beautiful medium, and sadly, it's phasing out right now, partly because the funding isn't there at the CBC, and perhaps there isn't the appetite for it that there once was. But I did a lot of radio drama, and that was a great training ground. And then they started taping some of the voices for animated shows in Toronto, like Care Bears. I think Strawberry Shortcake was probably my first gig, and you are all much too young to remember. Okay, all right.
Actually, you can be very surprised how long a shelf life English dub stuff has, especially in Quebec.
Okay.
Because it's Canadian content, so it really lasts a very long time in the local station.
Okay, that's a good point.
And we're the only
What's
country
that?
that actually
Well, and there are new generations, I suppose, who are being exposed to them, and I'm just going to take this opportunity to introduce some friends of mine who are here,
Sure.
and one of the members of the new generation, Kirby Hayes, is in the red wig over here. And she's a friend of mine and a dear friend of my daughter's. She's 12 years old, and she knows much more about the world of animation and cosplay than I probably ever will. So you can, grab her later and ask her some questions from her position in the newer generation. And that's Deborah Montgomery, my friend, her mother, sitting beside her. So they've come all the way from Toronto to join us today.
Welcome.
Hi, Kirby. Hi, Deb. So, yeah, you're right. So there's a new generation and people are exposed to them. So that's how I started voice acting, and we can get to some of the rest later. Go ahead.
Actually, here's a question from the earlier days. So when you decided to get into acting and theater production and so on, you chose Toronto. Were there any other options you were looking at back in the day?
Then, I think Toronto was considered the center for theatre, film, and television in English Canada, I should say. Vancouver, since then, has really grown in terms of what it has to offer. Alberta, I don't want to overlook Alberta. I had great theatre opportunities in Alberta, both in Calgary and Edmonton, and they still have vibrant theatre communities in both cities. The film community, as you know, is not as developed there, and people keep trying, and I lived in Calgary again 3 years ago for the year, and so I got to know it a little bit, and I know that there's some challenges in terms of getting it off the ground. There are so many resources there, so many talented people, directors, actors, writers, crew members, producers, that it seems to me that it would be a good location to foster more development in film and television, and hopefully that will happen one day.
Well, speaking as a working comedy improviser in Calgary, right now there's Heartland, Hell on Wheels, and that's basically it. So in terms of ongoing shows, but there's a lot of independent film going on there as well. But anyways, like I said, as a working comedy improviser, I may have a question about improvisation later on, but we'll just stick to what we got here. So let's move on to getting cast as Sailor Moon, because I know that you have a couple stories about that.
Well, that was a bit of a surprise in my life, but as an actor, you get used to auditions cropping up, and you just do them, and you just kind of, if you're smart about it, I think you don't think about it again, because most of the auditions that you do don't lead to anything, because you get used to being rejected, and that's just how it is. That's the biz. So this was one of those auditions when I was living in Toronto with I guess he was my boyfriend then, now my husband, Jeff Sackman, and we had two young friends visiting us from Calgary. And they were teenage boys and dear family friends, and we had a whole day planned. We were going to take them around to see Toronto, to go to Toronto Island, and I think the CNE and a few other things. And I got a call from my agent saying there's this animated series, and they're having trouble with the lead character. I don't know much more than that. It's called Sailor Moon or something like that. And can you just please go this afternoon and see them? They want to see you right away. And I said, well, we had plans, but of course you don't really say that because you take advantage of every job opportunity. So I said, of course. So I went in and I met the producer, Nicole Thual, and the director, Roland Parliament. And we were in a little sound studio. And the backstory, which probably a lot of you know, is that Tracy Moore started as the voice director of Sailor Moon, did 6 episodes, I believe, and as I'm led to understand, there were artistic differences between Tracy and Nicole. Tracy's a wonderfully talented actor and director, and I know her from Calgary. In fact, we did community theater together years ago, so it's kind of life taking a full cycle. But it just wasn't working out for them, and so Tracy decided to take her leave. But the timing was such that they needed to keep producing the shows, and they didn't have a voice actor now in the role of Sailor Moon. So Role of Parliament took over the role of director and actor sometimes, and they were auditioning for just this one character, Sailor Moon. Everybody else had been cast. So they wanted me to sound similar to Tracy's voice, to honor the audience and the voice that they had become accustomed to, but gave me leeway to kind of make it my own as well. But in the audition process, you're kind of trying to match voices. Now the irony is that I had also done previously a series called Care Bears, and I did 2 roles in that, so Baby Hugs and Shrieky. But get this, I moved to New York, and I continued to commute back for a number of years doing the show, and then at some point, it just wasn't productive for me or for the producers to have this commuting. And they cast, guess who, in my roles? Tracy Moore. So Tracy took over my 2 roles in Care Bears, and ultimately, as you know here, I took over Tracy's role in Sailor Moon. So back to that afternoon, I went in, I did the audition a couple of times. It went rather quickly, and then Nicole, the producer, looked at me and said, "Can you start tonight?" And I said, "Tonight? No, we have plans, we have guest intention." "Well, we have to start tonight," and Nicole is francophone, and so we had, actually now that I'm thinking of it, it was quite interesting. So we spoke a little bit of French, a little bit of English, my broken French, her broken English, and we communicated back and forth. And she was a wonderful producer. She was strong and passionate, just passionate about this show, and I have to say that a huge part of the success of Sailor Moon is due to her passion and her wanting to bring the best people in and just making it right and honoring the storylines, and she carries that passion with her. So Nicole said, "Can you start tonight?" I said, "Well, I'll see what I can do." So my husband took our young friends out that evening, and I started recording, and it was kind of a whirlwind after that. We recorded a couple of shows a day sometimes. I think the most we ever did in a day was 4 shows. That's a lot. And we just started working together, and it was great fun.
Wow. And it was really just a snowball after that, right? So maybe you can, we'll jump to a question from the audience in a minute, but one question I always had is, what was the dubbing process like for Sailor Moon? Because as I recall, there was slightly different than it is today, because you actually had the subtitles ready to go with, was it phonetic, or how did it work when you were doing the dubbing there?
It's sometimes phonetic, thanks. Yes, and that's the technology I'm most familiar with, which is outdated a decade later. But we called it the Rhythmaband, and I wasn't experienced with the Rhythmaband prior to Sailor Moon, so there was a bit of a learning curve. And the best training I had that helped with that was my music training. I sang and danced, and there's a rhythm to it, hence the Rhythmaband. So if you can imagine, let's say, who's been in a sound studio before? Not too many people. Okay, I'll try to set the stage for you a little bit. So, if you could imagine that this stage is the sound studio, and let's say Mark is maybe the sound engineer, he would be sitting, you can sit there, Mark. So let's just imagine that you're here, and there's a control panel in front of you, and you're working away at all the levers and so on. And then behind you would probably be, or beside you, the director, let's say Roland and Nicole standing at the back and kind of giving her direction to the director and the actors and the sound person. And then there would be a glass window between us and kind of a wall and usually a door, so we could go back and forth. And on this side, there would be a screen. Oh, look, a screen. Thank you for setting that up. There'd be a screen. It would be angled a little more this way, and I would see the screen, and it would be a picture of the show. So my back would be to the other team members, and below the screen, there would be a band, about, I don't know, maybe 12 inches high, maybe a little less, and it's sort of on a reel of sorts, and it has the dialogue, the text, underneath the picture of the actors. So I'm actually facing this way, but for this purpose, I'll face you. So a lot of actors might sit in front of a microphone. I have always preferred to stand because I find the job of voice acting very physical. And as you know, the role of Sailor Moon is very physical. So she's jumping and she's leaping and she's saving the world from the Negroes. And I find that the vocal production that you use is more believable when you're standing and the breath intake and that kind of thing. So the rhythm band is there, and it's synced up to the visuals of the characters, so that when the character's mouth is open, it's usually a vowel sound, A-E-I-O-U. And when the character's mouth is closed, it's some kind of a consonant. And so the people who have taken the time to translate the text into the rhythmoband have tried their best to match the movement of the voice to the text, but it doesn't always work. So ideally, you should be able to read the text, and if you're just reading it, it should match, but it doesn't quite work that way. So you have to be watching both things at once and adjusting, so stretching the vowels if Sailor Moon's mouth is open, and you're kind of stretching it. Now, if the people who wrote the text have it in sync, they'll do many O's. So it is phonetic in that sense. Yeah, just little codes that they envision that you get used to that tell you when you're closing your mouth and opening your mouth and that kind of thing. And then you just kind of improvise the rest.
So kind of a shorthand, really.
Kind of a shorthand.
Yeah, that's very interesting to hear, because these days, and from my own experience in the booth, nowadays you just put the cans on, they have the clip going, and then you hear in their ears, you go beep, 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 talk. And then the director will just say longer, shorter, more powerful, and so on, then give the direction that way. But there's no subtitles, there's no actual text on the screen anymore when they're doing it. So dare I say that the way they're doing it now is lazy versus the amount of effort that was put into when you guys were dubbing Sailor Moon.
Well, it seems that there's more responsibility placed on the actor in the second sense. They don't have the tool of the rhythmoband. It was helpful to have both, and also because you could sort of analyze the text beforehand and you could discuss it. I mean, there were times that we changed the text within reason, if it just didn't make sense or there had been some mistakes. And as you know, the original versions were edited, right? The Japanese versions were longer, more graphic, and so they, and more violent. And so they shortened and changed some of it. And by having the text in front of us, we could have a collective conversation sometimes about what was responsible and what worked better, that kind of thing.
Cool. So why don't we let's go out into the audience for a few questions. I have my list here, but we don't want you guys just sitting here. So if you guys have a question, just raise your hand and stand up and shout out. Yeah, we'll start with Clara. Stand up, please.
Yeah. I was just wondering, which episode did you dub from Sailor Moon that was the most interesting for you, or that you had the most fun doing? Was there one singular episode that you had the most fun?
Where she lost her lunch.
There is, but I can't tell you the name or number of it. But I can tell you why. Is that good enough?
Yes.
Sorry, the names and the numbers sort of meld together. Pardon me?
Description of it?
Yeah.
A description of it?
Like what happened in the episode?
Oh, I feel really inadequate right now.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. What I could maybe tell you better, because we did so many and they were so jam-packed together, I can tell you about that one episode and the essence of what I loved about the other episodes. How's that? So the one episode that I loved the most, Serena Sailor Moon was in every screen of the TV show. I don't know if that gives you any indication, but the reason I loved it is because the process that I described to you is usually stop and start. We're going to do this section, then this scene, then this, and there are other actors and so on. In this episode, it's pretty much Serena's Sailor Moon the whole show. You hardly heard any other characters, and maybe you didn't at all. But what was so magical about that day was that we taped that episode from beginning to end without stopping. So Roland and the technician started the rhythmoband. I, of course, knew the script. I read the script ahead of time. I knew what it was about. And we just went from beginning to end. And it was just organic, it flowed, it was exciting. And so for an actor who comes from a background of trying to make things as real and natural as possible, It felt completely natural, truthful, authentic, organic, because we went from the beginning of the story to the end of the story, and it was like a song, or it was an opportunity to storytell without interruption. And so it was really satisfying for me, and for the director, and the producer, and everybody. It was just, we kind of stopped, and we looked at each other and went, oh my goodness, we've never done that before, and we never did it after that. But it was really, and I wish I could tell you, I should do a little research and figure out which one that was, because that was so magical for us. And that was what we felt was one of the more truthful storytelling opportunities. And just as the part 2 of that, the other episodes that I loved, I really liked the opportunity to take Serena and find her foibles and her less than perfect qualities, and she's kind of klutzy, and she trips and she makes mistakes, and I thought that was really important as a piece of character development, because to me, one of the unique qualities of this story, Sailor Moon, for which I take no credit, by the way, it's the writers. I think they developed, number one, a hero who was a girl, and gave a role model for young people to look at, boys and girls, but a girl who was empowered, who really believed that she wanted to make a difference in the world and fight the Negaverse, and she was imbued with these superpowers that enabled her to do that. But on the other hand, she was just this ordinary person, like us. She had her faults, and she made mistakes, and she had her insecurities, and she's funny, and she's sweet, and she's not always all that nice, and she's a little grouchy sometimes, as we all are. And I loved that there were both sides to her, so that I hoped that the audience watching would feel that they could identify with her on a very human level, as well as this superpower that we have within all of us to get out there and fight the Negaverse. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Anyways, but yeah, let's keep on with questions. Please stand up.
What advice do you have for someone who wishes to become a professional dub artist?
You have an interest in becoming a dub artist. What's your name?
My name is Seb.
Seb.
Sebastian.
Sebastian. Seb for short. Nice.
He
Hi,
does
Sebastian.
too.
Terri. Do you live in the area?
Yes, I'm stuck in here. There's no dub studio anywhere.
There's no dub studio in Gatineau or Ottawa or?
Ottawa's got the CBC, but I don't think they do professional dubbing there.
Okay.
Or anime.
So the CBC is in Ottawa, but they don't do professional dubbing there. I'm not familiar with the local opportunities. What I can share with you is my experience preparing for those opportunities. How's that? So I don't think of dubbing or voice acting as separate from the craft of acting. So what I was able to do as a child was to get involved in community theater, and then as an adult as well. So what I might suggest is to take advantage of every opportunity that you can to get involved in community theater, to take an acting class if there's one at local colleges, or continuing education programs, that kind of thing. Or there might even be professional acting studios in the area, I'm not sure. But to that, and I'll maybe come back to that later, I might suggest that this community, this group of people, might be a very good resource, and it would be great if all of you could connect in some way and share information about the opportunities that you have in this area. How many people in this room are interested in maybe doing some dubbing? Okay, a lot of you. Okay, tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but I'm going to suggest that maybe at the end of this session today, maybe you want to meet just outside the hallway here and exchange emails or texts or whatever new techno-savvy way you all keep in touch, and share resources about the opportunities in the area. And that you will know more than I do, and collectively you will know a lot more than I do. And I was just going to say, and the other thing to watch for, and you can check for this on the internet, are opportunities to take courses with casting directors or voice directors. And there may not be any in Ottawa, I don't know, but I do know that in Toronto, those happen, and maybe it's worth a weekend trip there sometime. They cost money, so do your research. Ask online, ask your friends, is this a reputable casting director? Check out his or her biography. And if they're a respectable casting director or voice director, I would say it is a worthwhile endeavor to take a workshop with him or her, because you will learn technique, and hopefully you'll walk away with some material proof of your ability to do dubbing or voice work, and you can use that for auditions or trying to meet agents and those kinds of things. And we're going to talk about that a bit more tomorrow. Did you have a follow-up question to that, Seb?
No, I just want to point out there's an enormous community on the internet that wants to voice act. They get together on forums and discuss. They plan out fan works like you wouldn't believe.
You're right, I wouldn't believe it. This is a kind of a new world to me.
Sailor Moon Abridged.
Oh.
Sailor Moon Abridged is the name of the forum?
No, it's
The name of the work.
it's a fan-made abridged version of Sailor Moon with amateur actors and stuff.
Oh, it's a fan-produced version of Sailor Moon with their own actors, an abridged version. I have to check this out.
It's
They've
more of a
squished
parody.
several dozen.
Yeah.
Free on iTunes.
Okay, thank you for telling me.
It's worth checking out.
Okay.
They squished several dozen episodes into a couple minutes, really.
Yes.
And, it's really simple. Voice Acting Alliance is a good resource, by the way. So, online, there's that out there. But anyways, moving on. I'm sorry. Yes, Gaston. Gaston. Oh, sorry. You have one more. Sorry.
I just wanted to say thank you, my lady.
You're very welcome, Seb. Nice to meet you.
Sorry, Toby, please stand up.
My question would be, do you have any future projects you're going to be working on?
The question is, do I have and there was another part?
No, just to know if you have any future projects or new things you're going to be doing, or voice acting, or movies, or anything.
Do I have any new projects that I'm going to be working on? Well, I've taken a little detour in my life. And as some of you may know, I stopped working on Sailor Moon when I was pregnant with twins, Jake and Alexa. Alexa being Kirby's friend. And I was on bed rest for part of that pregnancy, and it wasn't a good idea for me to do the physical work that I just described to you. So at that time, the voice of Sailor Moon was taken over by Linda Ballantyne, who also did a lovely job. And I was really sad to let that job go, but I completely was happy to prioritize the health of my children. And so my life took a bit of a detour. If any of you are parents, you might understand that. And all of a sudden I had 2 babies in 2 arms, and I wasn't doing a lot of voice acting for a while. I did actually finish up a couple of shows I was working on, Quads, for example, and I took the kids to work with me, and yeah, it was kind of an interesting experience. But then I took a detour in my life for a lot of reasons. I'm with a partner who travels a lot, and I wanted to stay in Toronto with our kids. And as an actor, you're often called upon to travel. So I did a couple of film jobs, and I started to limit my horizons somewhat to care for my children. About a few years ago, I wanted to write a play because I'm also a playwright and a director, and I co-directed with Roland a little bit for Sailor Moon, and then I directed an animated series called Flying Rhino Junior High for a couple of years. That was a great experience. I loved that as well. So I was becoming more interested in writing and directing, and I went back to school and I got an MFA in playwriting and started writing. And I wrote a film that a Quebecois producer and director produced called The Book of Eve. It was based on a novel by Constance Beresford Howe and produced in Quebec. And check it out, it's the story of a 65-year-old woman coming of age. I'm very interested in women's and girls' stories. So the plays that I write and the film that I wrote are focused on women and children, generally. And at any rate, back to your question, there's a play that I wanted to write and I needed to research it, but I didn't quite have the research skills or I hadn't captured the discipline of writing again, now being a mother of 2 young children. So I did what any sane-minded person would do, and I enrolled in graduate school. And I thought that I could learn some research skills and deepen my knowledge in the areas that I wanted to write about. So I'm finishing off a master's in gender, feminist, and women's studies, and I've embarked on a PhD in theater studies. And I'm planning to use what I learned in my future writing projects. So there is a writing project that I've begun about women's identities, and it's connected to breastfeeding, and that's kind of all I can say. And perhaps next year I will have a website up and running again, and I will try to keep people apprised of those projects coming up, and I really appreciate your interest. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Please stand up.
What's your favorite Sailor Moon catchphrase?
My favorite Sailor Moon catchphrase. Moon healing activation! My pleasure. Thanks for giving my vocal exercise this morning.
Actually, that's a segue to a question I had. Was there a point in the Sailor Moon, in your Sailor Moon experience, was there a point where you woke up and did you realize that Sailor Moon was really taking off? That was a big thing, that it would eventually spiral into the grand legacy that it's had since then?
Yes, Mark, thank you for asking that, because I get to honor my mother in my answer to you. So my mother, Terri Hawkes, lives in Calgary, Alberta, and she loves Halloween. Now, my mother is an actor, and she got me involved in community theater. My very first job in community theater was playing a boy in a play that she was in. She said, honey, they're looking for a little boy for this play. Do you want to audition? And I did, and I got the part, so I got to be in a play with my mom, and it was great fun. So my mom has been involved in community theater and projects for years, and she loves Halloween, so she dresses up. Every year she dresses up for the kids who come to the door. So when I knew that Sailor Moon had really taken off was the year that my mother phoned me and said, honey, there were 20 Sailor Moons at the door. Are you kidding me? She said, no. And I told them that I was Sailor Moon's mother. I said, really? What did they say? She said, they kind of looked at me blankly. They didn't really know what to make of that. So she loves it, and she loved telling the kids she's Sailor Moon's mother, and she still dresses up for the kids at the door, and there aren't quite so many Sailor Moons right now, but to me that was sort of an indication that there was something in the zeitgeist, something in the universe, and Sailor Moon and the Sailor Scouts had taken off.
Well, there's there's a Sailor Mars and a Princess Serenity right there.
Hello! Thank you for dressing up. I'm so in awe of all the costumes, I've got to say. So Kirby filled me in a little bit last night on cosplay and how people take on the persona of their characters and how much deeper it can appear than on the surface. And that I'm imagining that you're very knowledgeable about your characters and yes, their likes and dislikes, and probably you could teach me a few things, so maybe we'll chat later. What's that?
You should come to Otaku. They had a whole group. They were only missing one Sailor Scout, which was technically, thanks to science, no longer planned.
Oh my gosh,
so sad. At that dawn last year, we have the whole group.
The whole group.
Oh, c'est magnifique!
You should see the pictures.
Oh, I'd like to.
Tuckathon's the big one.
Si vous avez les photos, peut-être je me donnais de voir.
Facebook, you just look at her Facebook and all of her friends, it's like an entire group.
Yeah. And then
Parfait.
Enemy North, they had a cosplay chess of Sailor Moon.
Oh, wait.
And there's Human Luna, Diana, Queen Vero dressed up, and Anne and Alan. It was amazing.
C'est très amusant.
There was a photo shoot also.
Yeah, photo shoots are amazing when it comes to the Sailor Scouts. They couldn't go anywhere. Traveling distance from here to the door would take roughly about 20 minutes.
How fun, how fun.
We can get back to people who have asked questions before, but you have not yet, so please stand up, please.
This is my first cosplay. I was like 9 or 8 years old, and it was Sailor Moon. And I remember this year it was snowing, and I was with my little skirt snowing, really cold, but a lot of fun.
So that was a very fond memory for you. That's nice.
And I have a question.
Wait.
I think there's a lot of people who want to become a voice actor or anything. I think there's a lot of competition. Did you ever ask like doubt or plan B?
The question is, there's a lot of competition in the voice acting world. Did I have a plan B? Well, I don't know that it was a plan B, but I, at one point early in my life, thought I might like to go to law school. My friend Deborah's a lawyer. Would that have been a better idea, Deborah? I don't know. But luckily, I guess I was able to gain work in this area. Now, that was a long time ago. I'm a lot older than you are. It is more competitive now. For sure it's more competitive, much harder to break in. So I think a plan B is always a good idea. And I'm a little biased, but I always think education is one of the best routes you can go. So when people come to me and ask, or say that they're interested in acting or the arts in general, my usual response is, if you're passionate about it, if you can't imagine yourself doing anything else, then you must pursue it. But have a way to pay the bills. But if you're not passionate about it, maybe consider just doing it, but doing it for fun, or coming to conventions, or doing community theater, or volunteering for professional theater, that kind of thing. There are ways to combine it in your life where you don't have to depend on it to earn a living, because it is very competitive. But if you're really passionate about it, give it all you've got, and yes, come to conventions like this or go to courses and just gather as much information as you can. So we'll be also talking a little bit more about that tomorrow. But I think if you're able to afford to go to school, to get a university degree, and have an alternative plan in life, that's probably a really wise thing that you'll be happy about later on.
All right, we have time for a couple more questions. Serenity first, and then we'll go back there.
It's not more of a question, more than a thank you for voicing Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon was the first TV show I watched in English. I'm francophone. And it made me learn English. It was my childhood, and I still love Sailor Moon. So thank you for bringing it in English.
That's very kind of you. Thank you for telling me that. And you obviously speak both languages
Yes.
beautifully, so I'm quite honored that you'd share that.
Oh, one thing. This girl got proposed on stage
Yes.
last year at Anime North
Yes.
wearing this
My
cosplay.
boyfriend was tuxedo mask.
That's a good luck costume. Félicitations.
All right, we're going to go into the back here.
Yes, I would like to know if there was a moment where you were feeling like Sailor Moon was taking control over you and you were feeling...
I'm sorry, encore mais lentement s'il vous plaît.
Oh, okay, yeah. If there was a moment where you were feeling like Sailor Moon was taking control over you and you were feeling the urge to say, Luna or Rini, just shut up because you're getting on my nerves.
You might want to ask my husband that. Do I take on the characteristics of the character that I'm working? Probably subconsciously. I'd like to think that I have a good dividing line between my professional life and my home life, but probably I take a little bit of each character with me, and I would like to think that I took some of Sailor Moon, Serena's tenaciousness, and her passion for righting wrongs, and I'd like to believe that I left behind some of her impatience, and probably I'm wrong on all counts.
Coming up here.
Oh yes, in regards to since you were such a great, voice actress for the character, and since they're redoing the Sailor Moon series for this year, and when it gets translated into English, would you actually be willing to redo the character for the new series that's coming out?
Are you producing the new series?
Not unless I'm able to, but would you actually want to recast?
If the circumstances were right in my life and my other commitments, I would be honored to reprise this role. I have a great fondness for Sailor Moon and Serena, and for the team of actors who portrayed the other characters. It was really a very special, talented group of passionate and principled people, and I would be privileged
Well,
to
that's
work
what
on
I
this
would
again.
appreciate, because when it comes to English dubbing anime, frankly, I only feel that our country does it the best.
Yeah.
You know, I think we're really lucky in Canada, and partly we have the government to thank, because they've created some tax situations that have made it desirable for companies to bring their work to Canada. And consequently, there are a lot of Canadian actors who are very good at voice acting, and I know in the Quebec, the Francophone community as well, I was able to work with a number of Francophone actors on a film that I directed the dubbing for the film of Carmina. Anyway, they were just such a great group of actors to work with, and I know that the arts community in Quebec is so strong as well. So both in the Francophone and the Anglophone community, we are very fortunate. You're right. We have some great actors, directors, writers, producers
That's how
here.
I got into anime. I loved watching it when I was a kid. There was a whole bunch of classics I used to watch, but they were all Canadian dubbed. Then I started watching some of the American dub. I went back to the Canadian dub, and it got so bad that when I watched some of the stuff that I love watching English dub, but they just turn it to American, it's like, I'll just watch it in Japanese. I got the subtitles on. I don't care.
So you really prefer the Canadian dubs?
Canadians seem to put more feel into the creativity, like you do. You have to act serious, you have to act klutzy, you have to be like, you have all those different personas, and you show that when you do your voicing. Sometimes when you hear some of the other dubbing, it's like, they're not putting that feel into it.
Well, I really appreciate that, and we do put a lot into it for sure, but in defense of my American cousins, I would say there are some amazing actors in the United States as well. It probably, I'm guessing, has more to do with budget, time, that kind of thing. And they might be non-union dubs as well, which means they're usually actors with less experience.
When it comes to some of the bigger productions like Warner Brothers, DC and all that, their voicing, they literally go to actors to do some of their dubbing. And there's only some select actors that are not even like top-notch actors who actually do dubbing that you can hear it and you feel it, and when you hear that voice, oh great, I can really enjoy this.
That's true. There's a different skill set that comes from dubbing actors and actors who are well-known film actors who are hired because of their name value. That's very true. Good observation. Thanks.
Okay, one more question, then we'll have to call it. Please stand up.
Hi, my name is Marty, and I just wanted to give a shout out because for the last 2 years I've been thankfully involved with this group called Act Ottawa, and I just wanted him to know about it. And you know,
Act Ottawa, Marty, he's the guy. Raise your hand, Marty. Black toque, that's Marty. You want to look for him afterwards.
Right now I'm learning to be a screenwriter, but I was happy to have been involved with Act Ottawa, and if people want to learn about acting, check it out. It's actottawa.com or .ca, I forgot which one. But yeah, it's really nice people, and they teach you a lot about the acting process.
And Marty, can they find you online if they missed you here at the convention, Act Ottawa?
Yeah, and you can always write me, Marty, mardy.men, M-E-N, @gmail.com.
Marty, M-A-R-D-Y,
.men,
at gmail.com.
And also, if you want, just you could look me up. I'm just learning right now, but you could look me up on IMDb. Just write my name. I'll be the second Marty.
Okay.
And
IMDb, the second Marty.
Yeah, Marty
Man.
And I'm in a little short called First Snow, and you can check it out.
The short is called
First Snow.
First Snow. How appropriate.
Yeah.
For this weekend, this chilly weekend. Thank you very much, Marty.
Now, I'm afraid we do have to reset for the next panel. So, if you're happy to stick around for a bit, maybe we can have a little bit of chat.
Absolutely, but can we do one thing before we?
Absolutely.
I just really love the collective energy of all the Sailor Moon people, and I wonder if we could do a Sailor Moon chant together. So maybe something like Moon Prism Power, and we'll take that power for good, for fighting the Negaverse. We'll take it with us for the rest of the day and maybe the whole year. Yes, are you game?
Sure. How about, and why don't we take a cue from you, Terry, and let's all stand up and do it.
Okay.
Everyone.
So we're going to do Moon Prism Power, and we have to do it with a hand, right? We have to all just send our positive energy up into the universe, okay? And also, remember, tomorrow we're going to be talking a little bit more about the business aspect of voice acting for those of you who are interested, and we can answer other questions too. It's a pretty informal setup, which is really nice. So I'm here to answer more questions tomorrow if you want. So for today, let's gather our positive energy. We're going to fight the Negaverse with Moon Prism Power on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Moon Prism